I'm from CIBC, that's a Canadian bank. I'm not going to give you the full title, we'll be here till 1 o'clock. But we put a software team here about 4 years ago, precisely because of the previous panel talking about Europe. We thought Europe was a fantastic opportunity for us to come from North America with the software lending expertise and try and get that to work in Europe, mainly Northern Europe. And that's what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. In that time, we've funded over 50 companies and we've nearly got $1 billion into the marketplace. We're a debt funder, we're not an equity funder, but the equity part of it is, of course, very important to us and what we look for. And increasingly, we ask ourselves, how deep is your moat? So we're going to go through that right now. And we're probably going to go through it in a little bit more detail than the previous panel that talked about enterprise software, where I thought they made a lot of really excellent points. We still think that there are moats out there because we're still actively deploying. Just give you a little bit of corporate propaganda. Sorry about this. We're a leading North American bank. We're in the top 10 by market cap there. We're across all of the US and Canada. And we have a fairly large team here in Europe focusing on a range of different things from capital markets to infrastructure and increasingly software. So let's go to software and what do lenders think about when they try to put money out the door to software companies. Here is the Old Testament, if you like. We look at these things. How big is the market that you're running at? Do we understand the proposition? Some software companies, I think, are pretty complicated and it's quite hard to unravel really what they're doing. GRR and NRR, I believe these things are still really true. I think one of the speakers from the previous panel, but one was talking about enterprise software is dead. I mean, some of it for sure is dead, but a lot of it is not, and we are actively deploying. So GRR and NRR remains really important. LTV to CAC is an important ratio, but it gets debated a lot because it's quite hard to measure, I think, well, but it's still a key point. Growth rate, obviously. Cash burn and liquidity was something that was sort of disregarded, I think, in 21 and 22, and it's coming home to haunt a lot of companies now. A lot of other companies are getting that right and have a much better calibration on are they burning in the right way and are they bringing a company to market that's going to survive. And of course, the enterprise value. What is this company really, really worth? And you hear, just to go back to some of the scare stories that we hear now about SaaS, what is the right multiple on a software company now? If you were here 4 or 5 years ago, you would probably say, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times ARR. And I still think people get that. But then on the downside, people will say, well, is it really 3 or 4 times ARR now? And then depending on the situation, the context that it's in, you might even hear numbers less than that. That's relevant to us, by the way, because we typically look at lending as, if we lend 1 times ARR, does that feel safe to us? We would historically have said, yeah. Is that going to glide down a little bit? Possibly. And will we go north of that? Well, for sure we do, but we'll need to see these things. But we'll also need to see something else. And this is the new kid on the block now of what does AI do to the lenders and also the equity investors. Now, in banks, we're really good at a few things. One of them is coming up with frameworks. And sometimes I think we're too good about it because you just think, will you get your framework away from me? Some middle office person comes up to you and is trying to get in your way. I'm going to share with you our framework now for how we look at lending. Some of this is borrowed from other people, but it's actively used by us in how we look at companies. So if you want to come up later in sort of 10 minutes and have a quick selfie in front of it, you're welcome. So here we go. So let's just start top left. I hope you can see that. If you can't see that at the back, then there's plenty of seats at the front. Just how AI replicable is it? Now, for some businesses, I'd say that's pretty replicable. So certainly if it's in the world of B2C, where there is no sort of corporate firewall to get past, then that could well happen. And we might even see this play out in front of our very eyes in the next few months if Anthropic has a proper run at Lovable. I don't know if they're going to do that or not, but if they did, it would sure be interesting to see what happens and whether some of these other things come into play. But there are a bunch of other things, which is why I think the death of enterprise SaaS or enterprise software could well be sort of overly reported right now. If we just go down the left, a lot of companies need to be integrated into the company's tech stack, and this is not easy. Often it can take 3-4 months to deploy tools into companies that needs to be tested, either vibe tested, which you would think would be faster, or it could take a long time to get it tested. I think we had a speaker here earlier talking about the context of how you market your product. This is very important, this integration thing. It's one of our key underwriting questions as to how sticky is that company really going to be. I think the speaker from Gentic talked about sovereignty. And I thought that was a really great way of expressing it, because if you have a workflow critical tool, then that is incredibly important to you in terms of your sovereignty as to how you're running your process. And there is a bunch of software companies out there where they are workflow critical, whether it's a life sciences sort of like workflow tool, you have to get that right. You can't just chuck it out to Claude and track it that away. It has to be properly regulated. We'll come to that in a second. So these 2 points on the left are really key parts of your moat, I think. Lots of these companies are systems of record, and that's really important for lots of reasons. It's got all of your corporate history on there. If you get inspected by your relevant regulator, it's terribly important for that. So the data memory part of a software product is also really important, or what other people call it system of record. There's a lot of things that make it very sticky. Maybe back to life sciences, but also back to lots of other types of businesses. There's lots of regulation out there, and this is really important. So I was talking to another life sciences company yesterday. They have a really fascinating product for how you track drug trials, and that's pretty important. You can't just like outsource your drug testing to a vibe-coded product that came around the corner yesterday. I don't think anybody's going to take that type of risk. What I'm not trying to say is that no software company out there is under threat. Of course, a lot are, but there are an awful lot of other areas where I think it could be pretty safe for companies. And a number of others have like data exclusivity, so that they have a deep set of data that only they have, proprietary data, and software runs off that. And if you don't have access to that proprietary data, then I don't think you're going to be able to invade it or knock them out of the way. And so how software started, I think, was accounting systems, ERP systems, CRM systems. These things, I think, will remain. But software, and I think as Mark Andreessen said, increasingly is eating the world. Now, maybe we won't say software anymore. Maybe we'll come up with another word. But it continues to move into new areas, which it wasn't, say, 10 years ago. I think the first panel that was on after coffee was about agri-tech. And in the last 2 years, we have seen funding into IoT devices, working with software to track various types of salmon farms, other fishing farms, managing dairy herds, managing how herds roam around the land without using fences. So agri-tech has been a huge adopter of technology and software, and I think that will continue. EdTech continues to move more into software to sort of like make the life of the teacher easier and easier. I mean, it's a really tough job anyway, so anything that software can do to help there is welcome. Renewable energy, we see tons of software products now working with wind and solar and other types of power to make the delivery of power more efficient into the grid. So we remain, I think it's fair to say, cautiously positive about how we look at software, and we are seeking to deploy more into the European ecosystem as well as sort of keeping our North American business vibrant. So I've gone through that rather quickly. I think I've still got 6 minutes left. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts or questions on what I had there, observations. It looks like I've stunned everybody. Well, look, I'm around at the back. We're actively deploying. If anybody's got an alternate point of view on this or an improvement to it, because I think everybody needs one of these things when they're deploying in this market context now. Well, I think that'll do. So we could have the music again. Thanks very much.